Hey everybody, this intro has one message: Black Lives Matter. That's all I have to say to get us started. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. I hope you are all well. I hope that you and your families and your friends and your support system have everything you need to get through these times, and that you have someone there for you to help you as we deal with this sort of unprecedented time in the United States. It's taken me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to speak on this video. So I think I first just want to make sure it's very clear that I believe 100% in the Black Lives Matter movement. All Black Lives Matter. I'm here for our Black men, Black women, Black transgender women, Black transgender men, Black gay men, Black lesbians. All of their lives matter, and we need to do better. We absolutely need to do better. But in that being said, I have the least authority to put together any sort of video regarding how to educate yourself or what to read in this moment. To be honest with you, I have been doing a lot of diving and searching and watching of things myself, remembering and reliving the words of James Baldwin, reading the essays of Toni Morrison, taking time to recognize how important these men and women, these writers, have been to myself. I've watched a lot of videos, I've read a lot of articles, and I will link some of them down below if you are interested in seeing what I have been diving into in order to better educate myself, to be a better ally for the Black Lives Matter movement. As you guys probably know, if you've watched my channel for any time or period, I have 3 nephews that are Black and 1 niece who is Black, and we are very close to our niece and nephews. We love them very, very much. And I constantly, before any of this happened, and even more now, have worried and have anxiety about the world that they live in. And I have been trying really hard and have had many conversations with our niece, who is, just graduated college. So she, we can have these conversations, how we can better support her in the world that she lives in. So I also am not one to give you a reading list regarding what books can help educate you about racism in America. There are people out there that are smarter, better educated, and just have more knowledge about the subject than I will ever have. So I will link some of those reading lists down below, and I encourage you to dive into those if that is what you want to do. Because I would say, if you watch my channel, you watch my channel because you're a reader. And I have always said that I read to experience the lives of people that are different than mine. As you guys know, I read a lot of books about and by people of color, and they are some of my favorite writers. So what I thought I would do today is, instead of giving you some list of books that I think you should read, I talk about some of the books that I have on my shelves that I am going to read, and that I've had for some of them for longer than others. Some of them I've read many books by the authors, and some of them are new to me. And I thought I would just share that with you, and how important Black women and men writers have been to me as the reader that I am today. I am not going to try to get historical. I'm not going to try to give you facts and stuff like that. That is not what this video is about. This is really about the effect that Black men and women artists, authors have had on me and my development as a reader. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that some of these books may inspire you to pick up these authors, and hopefully you'll see sort of my passion about many of them that are in this stack. I tried to keep them sort of in a chronological order of sort of when the books are published and when the books came out, or when the authors were sort of in their prime. But again, it's not definitive. I'm not trying to make any sort of list here that is like, this is what you should read. But these are just some of the authors and some of the books that have really sort of been coming off my shelf to me in this time period. So let's get started probably with one of my favorite writers, and a collection of short stories that has recently come out by her, and that is Zora Neale Hurston. Now, this collection of short stories is called Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick. As you guys probably know, if you've watched my channel, I have talked ad nauseum about Zora Neale Hurston's novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I remember the day that I started that book. It was actually an 11th grade reading book for me while I was in high school. And I remember that first paragraph so vividly that to me, it's probably one of the quintessential first paragraphs ever in all of literature. It's up there with the Charles Dickens opening, the Tolstoy opening. Their Eyes Were Watching God, to me, is one of the 5 greatest American novels ever written. And to me, Zora Neale Hurston has taught me so much about the Black experience from her perspective here in the United States. There is a short story that's actually in this collection, which I have read many, many times, called Sweat. I think it is absolutely brilliant, and I have given it and recommended it to hundreds of people over my years as a reader and a person who shares my love of reading with others. And this collection of short stories, which I have already started prior to everything going on, dipping in and out. Tiari Jones, who you guys may all know from An American Marriage, wrote the introduction, and she recommends reading Zora Neale Hurston out loud because there's a sense of dialect and personhood in Zora's work where you just get a real sense of the authenticity of her work by hearing it as you read it. I truly believe that if I hadn't read Their Eyes Were Watching God in 11th grade, I would not have had the passion about literature that I went through my whole entire adult life with. And I love that book, and I love her as a writer, so this is sort of the next step for me. And that is Zora Neale Hurston's Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick. It's a collection of short stories that are out now. Just take a look at Zora. She is such a stylish, fantastic woman. I love this picture of her. Love it. She had a very interesting, tumultuous life too. So there's just a lot to dive into if you dive into her life and her work. So highly recommend. This video would be incomplete if I weren't to mention Toni Morrison. Now, let's be honest. I have talked to you guys before. Toni Morrison, to me, is arguably the greatest American writer of all time. Song of Solomon is one of my favorite books ever. And I have read almost every book that Toni Morrison has written. So I thought when I was talking about this video and knew that I had to add Toni Morrison in. Toni Morrison has taught me how language can teach, how language can breathe life into character, into situation, and how a book can utterly transform the way you look at literature. And I think she's just utterly brilliant. And I've spent a lot of time during this time watching old interviews or reading essays by Toni Morrison, just because she inspires me to be a better person, and she inspires me to be a better reader. So I thought the book that I would sort of bring up here would be Tar Baby by Toni Morrison, because it is actually one of the few of her novels that I have not read, and I believe it's one of her first novels. This is the story of a Black woman. She's a model, but she's lived a lot of her life in white culture, and a love affair that she winds up having with a Black man who sort of represents everything on the other side of the divide, all of sort of her fears and desires in the world. And it goes from the riches of these Caribbean estates and all this white wealth to the reality of the American South. So it is a novel that sort of focuses on the juxtaposition of these two extremes, and this woman who has lived her life in one and is in love with someone from another. I can only imagine that this book is going to be as brilliant as everything else that Toni Morrison has read. I'm super excited that there's still Toni Morrison out there that I haven't read, because she, luckily for me, wrote many, many books. And so I've read so many, and I'm in awe of her, and all of her stuff, all of her words inspire me, and inspire a lot of the writers that I love next. You know what I mean? I see her in a lot of the future of the literary world. And yeah, I think she is a literary genius. So this is Tar Baby by Toni Morrison. A woman who I think a lot of people on my channel know that I totally adore, and I think is recognized for a lot of reasons, but who I find not enough people know about if you're not in the know, if that makes sense. And that is Octavia Butler. Now, Octavia Butler is a science fiction fantasy writer, and when she was writing science fiction and fantasy, she really was one of the few, if only, Black writers of science fiction and fantasy. I have read and adored Kindred. I've read and adored Parable of a Sower. I have seen many different iterations. I've read the graphic novels of those two books and all of this kind of stuff. And this is a collection of her short stories that I purchased maybe a year ago now, when I was in an independent bookstore in Oregon. And I love this one because there's an introduction from Octavia where she basically says she hates writing short stories, but here you go, here's my collection of short stories. And I just love sort of the sophistication of her writing. And she has a way of just creating a story within a few moments where you are just absorbed in. So this is called Bloodchild. It's a collection of short stories by Octavia Butler. And if you have not read Octavia Butler, highly recommend starting with Kindred. I think it is probably one of the the canon of science fiction and fantasy. It belongs in the conversation all the time, and it has affected the future of science fiction and fantasy. When you read her stuff, you see sort of how she laid the groundwork for a lot of the stuff that came afterwards. So I think she is absolutely brilliant. We're now going to get into some more contemporary writers and books that by a couple that I've read a lot of, and then a book that I have not read, and then something completely different because I like to mix it up. I think if you've watched my channel enough, you know that I am an utter fan of Colson Whitehead. I think Colson Whitehead is a genius. And he writes about race in America currently in a way that sometimes is extremely allegorical, but sometimes is just straight on looking at it, throwing it right there in your face, and making you realize sort of some of the stuff that has gone on in the history of the United States. He's a 2-time Pulitzer winner. He won the National Book Award. And if you get a chance to see him speak in person, I highly recommend it. Now, John Henry Days is one of his older novels, and it is one that I have not read. Now, I think we all know the story of John Henry. We heard about it in elementary school as one of sort of those stories that we're all told. I'm going to read the back of this one just so that I can make sure that I sort of catch all the nuance. So on one level, John Henry Days brilliantly retells the story of the black steel driver who died outracing a machine designed to replace him. On another level, it's the story of a disaffected black journalist on a mission to set a record for junketeering who attends the first annual John Henry Days Festival. It is also a thrill ride through the tunnel where American legend gives way to American pop culture, replete with PR flacks, bluesmen, and turn-of-the-century song pluggers. Intellectually dazzling and laugh-out-loud funny, This extraordinary novel is a tour de force from one of the finest authors writing today. And I completely agree. I think whenever Colson Whitehead puts out a novel, he has something to say, which we should be listening to. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about him other than I think he's an utter genius. So this is John Henry Days. I recommend any of Colson Whitehead's novels. I think The Nickel Boys and The Underground Railroad really are two of his books that are getting all of the current rage, but he has books. He's written many, many books, and all of them are worth your time. And I highly recommend The Institutionist if you guys have a chance. I think that, to me, may be actually his greatest novel. And so that's Colson Whitehead's John Henry Days. And yeah, when I saw him speak, I actually got that signed, and sort of in awe that I have sort of a whole section of my library signed by him. The next book is actually one that I have not read. And the author published one book in her life, and I've only heard amazing things about it. And so this came out in 2004, and that's The Darkest Child by Dolores Phillips. I will say it's interesting that this also has an introduction by T.R.E. Jones, and I think T.R.E. Jones wrote the introduction to this, the introduction to the new Zora Neale Hurston collection, and the introduction to The Street by Ann Petrie, which I've talked about on my channel as well. So she is really, I've gotten to see sort of her dive into these Black women authors that really have inspired. This book was reissued not that long ago. It only came out in 2004, but this is special edition just came out, and it is actually blurbed on the front by Octavia Spencer, who is one of my favorite actresses on TV. This takes place in 1958 Georgia. We have this young 13-year-old girl named Tangy, and she's not the oldest child in her family. She's not the youngest child in her family. She's the darkest child in her family. And because she is the darkest, she is considered by her mother to be the ugliest child in the family. But she's brilliant. She's smart. She's good at what she wants to do in the world. But she pulls her daughter, her mother pulls her from school when they turn 12 because it's time for them to earn a living. They need to earn a living to help support the family. And it says here that she sends her children to earn their keep, whether it's in domestic service in the fields or at the farmhouse on the edge of town where Roselle beds local men for money. That's the mother. But Tangy, who is our main character, is selected to be part of the first integrated class at a nearby white high school. She has a chance to change her life, but can she break from her mother's grasp without ruinous, even fatal consequences? This time period, I mean, if you guys have watched sort of the videos or any sort of historical documents about the integration of the school system here in the United States, you realize how amazingly brave the young men and women were that did this, that took the chance to integrate into a white school, and what they had to deal with just to go to school. I've started this book, actually. I'm going to probably read this one pretty soon, but it's been on my shelf for a little bit, and I've heard nothing but rave reviews, and I think it really tells part of the story of the Black experience here in the United States. So that's The Darkest Child by Dolores Phillips. Okay, two more, I promise. I've really talked longer in this video than I thought I would, but I hope you guys see sort of my passion for these writers and how important they are to me. They really are to me. And again, like Toni Morrison, I don't think that I can talk about Black American writers without talking about Jasmine Ward. To me, she takes sort of the torch from Toni Morrison. With Toni's passing, Jasmine Ward is the voice of a generation. I think that her two novels, Savage the Bone and Sing Unburied Sing, are brilliant. There's like nothing more to say about them. But I've read both of them, so I'm going to be talking about Where the Line Bleeds, which was actually her debut novel. And I bought this book really just because it got reissued after she won the National Book Award. And, and if you haven't read Jasmine Ward's nonfiction, please do. Her book, Men We Reaped, which is a memoir about 6 men in her life that all died for more or less being Black men in the United States. And that simplifies a very complicated and beautiful, beautiful book. And Jasmine Ward is brilliant. I think that's really the go-ahead here. This is the story, Where the Line Bleeds is the story of 2 twins who are raised by their grandmother in sort of the rural part of Mississippi. And it says, over the course of a single life-changing summer, as they struggle to find work and contend with the reappearance of their parents, who are parents that they probably don't need to reappear, the brothers are forced into a series of decisions that will ultimately damn or save them both. A delicate and closely observed portrait of fraternal love and the strife and bonds that can sustain and torment us. Yeah, so Jasmine Ward, to me, puts everything she puts out. I think she has a new children's book out now. Actually, I know she has a new children's book out right now, which I don't know why I don't have. And I'm super excited. And yeah, so there you go, Jasmine Ward. It's interesting. There were a lot of authors that I wanted to put into this list. I could be talking about Jacqueline Woodson, 100%. I think Jacqueline Woodson is one of the brilliant literary minds in American letters. But I've read everything Jacqueline Woodson has written. I've read them all. And I was trying to really think about what I was going to read next when I put this together. And I could have talked about Brandon Taylor's Real Life, which to me is a debut novel that came out this year that may be my favorite book I've ever read of all time, that talks about the Black queer experience here in the United States. There's so much. There's just Black men and women, Black gay men and women, Black trans women have done so much for the world I live in. You know, I owe so much to Black trans women in the Stonewall movement. They were there on the front lines causing that riot, which gave me a lot of the rights that my husband and I have today. They create, Black men and women of all types, create the art that I love to spend my time in and teach me each and every day. The last person I'm just going to bring up, because I've sort of dived into this and out of this, that is the poetry collection, Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. I hold this book up for you because I think we should support poets and buy their books, because I know that poetry is not something that a lot of people run out there and purchase. But I highly recommend YouTubing Danez Smith. Listen to him read his work. Allow him to use his words to affect you, because I promise you they will. He talks about the Black queer experience in America in a way that is visceral, brutal, beautiful, and utterly awe-inspiring. And I don't read a lot of poets, but when I do read something like this, I realize that they say something about the world in a way that the novelists I read do not. And there are times when I was reading this collection that just brought me to the verge of tears, and then sometimes to the sobbingness, and to the beauty of what one person can do with language in such an amazing way. But I highly recommend, if you can, YouTubing him and watching him talk about his own work. So that is Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. So I think I end this with the same sort of sentiment that I started with. Black Lives Matter. All Black Lives Matter. Don't forget that there are many, many people out there who have been killed that need our support, and we need to do better. We just need to do better. So educate yourself, do better in the ways that you can do better. If you can donate money to causes, do that. If you want to be out there on the front lines protesting, do that. If you just want to educate yourself so you can help educate others, do that. Read these important artists. Realize how important their music, their culture is to the world that we live in, and don't take it for granted. And I just want to say that I thank you all for watching my channel. I hope you are all getting through this time, and you are safe, and I hope you are, doing what you need to, and however you want to participate. I'm here if you guys ever want to talk about anything, or I would love to discuss in the comments what books are you reading right now to help you get through this, to educate you more, and what are you watching, what are you learning from, and what are you doing? So, as always, if you are a return subscriber, I could not do this without you. I thank you very much. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I hope all of these books some way inspire you. As always, I recommend always shop locally, read globally, and until next time, I wish you happy reading. Bye.